Some competitions are held to find the winner. Some competitions are held simply as a formality. Everyone knows who the winner will be. But they still hold the competition, just to be able to say that everything was done in a fair manner. Boeing 299 was one such plane. The First World War ended in 1918. But the tensions never went away. And as we know now, there was a Second World War from 1939. In 1903, the first plane was flown, the first ever plane. And in just a couple of decades, using a plane to travel thousands of kilometers to meet your grandparents was a normal thing. What else was normal after the first plane? Not long after 1903, planes were used in war. In fact, military planes came before passenger planes. Things moved incredibly fast in these decades. By the 1930s, the USA already had started using bomber planes for dropping bombs inside enemy territory. In 1934, they announced they wanted to replace their B-10 bomber. They needed a new bomber plane that met certain strict criteria. The plane should be able to fly to 10,000 feet. Flight time, at least 10 hours. Top speed, 320 km/h. The competition. On October 30th, 1935, on an airfield in Ohio, USA, 3 companies' bomber plane prototypes assembled for a competition: Martin's bomber, Douglas's bomber, and Boeing's bomber, the 299. On paper, the Boeing's plane was far ahead of Martin's and Douglas's. It could carry far more weight than required, fly farther than anything before, and all that while being much faster. In addition to that, it had many guns pointing out in all directions. It could fly higher up. It was called the Flying Fortress by a newspaper. The Boeing 299 was so good, many considered the competition among the 3 planes a mere formality. A group of top Army people and executives from the manufacturing companies were attending the event. The Boeing 299 taxied to the runway. It looked imposing. Its aluminum body glistened. It was a long and wide aircraft. Had 4 engines instead of 2. It thundered across the runway and climbed smoothly into the sky. Then it stalled, turned to one side, and crashed. There were 5 people on the plane. 3 survived. 2 died, including the pilot. Investigations into the crash revealed that there was nothing technically wrong with the plane. It was pilot error. But the pilot testing this prototype new plane was one of the most experienced test pilots of his time. Turns out that the plane was extremely complicated. There were too many things to control and check. The pilot forgot to release a lock for one of the controllers. The lock helped keep the controllers safe while on the runway. They were supposed to release the lock for flying. The smaller bomber plane made by Douglas won the competition. Still, some people in the military were sure this was a plane worth buying. A group of test pilots started working on a strategy to see what could be done about the plane. They came up with a solution so simple but so smart, it allowed for the Boeing 299 to be flown without hassles. Checklist. They wrote a list of things to check while taxiing, taking off, flying, and landing. And that solved it. With a checklist made a standard part of flying the plane flew millions of kilometers without an accident. The U.S. Army ordered over 13,000 Boeing 299. They called it the B-17. That one simple checklist allowed planes to become far more complicated. Checklists of items to check before, while, and after flight are still used heavily today, nearly 100 years later in every plane flown. Investing and checklists. We as humans have limited space to keep things in our mind. We already have so many things running in our minds. It is easy to forget something crucial. This is why many investors maintain a checklist for things to look at before investing. Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger are most famous in the investment world for their use of checklists, but several fund managers are also known to heavily rely on checklists. Where can you get a checklist for investing? A checklist isn't something written in stone. It is not something only one person on earth can make. Checklists are made by whoever needs them. You should make your own checklist. If you think you don't know enough to make your own checklist, then you should educate yourself more. Never use a checklist made by someone else that you do not understand. It could be for anything, not just stocks. People have checklists for investing in IPOs, mutual funds, real estate, even FDs. Many people keep checklists for finance, not just investing. You could have an annual checklist for different stages of filing your income tax, maybe a checklist for things to check before getting an insurance or taking a loan, a checklist for getting a credit card or even opening a bank account. Whatever it is, educate yourself enough to understand and make your checklist, and then use the checklist.